Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kryptonized. Joining me is a brand new guest. He and I have just met, but I love these opportunities to meet people in the community. His name is Tiho. And before we jump into our discussion today, Tiho, would you please introduce yourself?
Well, I'll keep it short and simple. Thanks for having me on. I like finding where discussion takes us, like a little chance of discovery. So I started a channel called Arcane Bear. And over the years, we've focused on research into fringe topics. As we got better at that, we realized that it's actually pretty profitable to find things early and be right about it. So we started to have a kind of a hyper focus into venture capital and or at the very least finding unique ideas early that we think would be profitable within the tech and more specifically the Web3 space. So that started initially with Bitcoin, but it was sidelined with a myriad of other conversations in its early days, but alongside PhDs in physics or biology. We just like a good conversation. But over the last years, we've focused now pretty much only on Web3 gaming, at least at this moment. We're very excited about the potential for the proliferation of the technology and even the potential of something like sovereign identity or sovereign governance. We've got sovereign money. I think Bitcoin it can help solve a lot of problems. The technology in general can do that. So what we're interested in is how does this technology find the community base that it can reward, I guess, for participating, and where is that adoption the most useful? And it seems to be often in crisis. We first kind of really caught Bitcoin under our radar during the Cypriot banking collapse when the Cyprus bank said, "Hey, anyone with over $100,000, we're just taking all your money." And I don't think a lot of people recognize that just because the banks function that way in Cyprus doesn't mean they can't do that in the USA.
Oh,
the USA has
been,
can. Yeah. So this kind of started our journey into where are we good at research? What can we do about it? And how do we provide that kind of delivery method? So we have a private newsletter and a private group that we, focus now specifically on Web3 gaming, but venture, I guess it's a philosophy and is a long-term strategy for picking the winners of the future.
Well, we already know in the United States that they will, take money out of your account. In Canada, they just shut down thousands of accounts. I know that's Canada. Here in the US, believe me, they can do it. They have done it, and they will do it if worse comes to worse. But this isn't a political show, but it is one about altcoins and crypto in general. So you have a fund, you're investing primarily in Web 3.0 projects or more of the blockchain crypto space?
Well, I guess it depends how you categorize it. Right now, it's specifically games utilizing crypto or blockchain or Web3 as a backdrop to its support mechanism for a bunch of features and functions. When we kind of pick Bitcoin apart as a somewhat of a trust machine. When I first found out, the idea of sovereign money is real, or non-state backed money is really what sold me from a concept point. I'm not a technical person. In fact, I can't read the Bitcoin code. I don't care to. I was sold on its concept, and I'll make investments based off concepts because I believe that the concept is ultimately valuable. And I could have been wrong on the tech, but we were not, clearly. So this technology at broad, kind of at large, provides a lot of unique functions, but I think they're usually more notably profound within a state of economic crisis. Now, we won't keep it political. So what we'll do is we'll focus on the fact that this has happened many times before. And history has this unique kind of feature where it keeps repeating itself. We keep trying to tell future generations not to let history repeat itself. And then in the throes of all of it happening, most of the population can't clearly tell that the exact same thing that's happened.
It's human nature. I mean, history's going to repeat itself. You're not going to stop it. As much education as we can give people, right? Again, it's not political, but look at what's happening with the younger generation and their belief in socialism and communism. We won't go down that road.
Well, it's important, I think, for me, is this discussion has often been about who is the state winner over the next few years. And I don't believe that it is. I've started reading a book called The Sovereign Individual recently, and some of its ideas I really like. Some ideas that we have also thought very, very powerful within their sentiment. For instance, I've always said YouTube actually has created a lot of decentralization, and people would argue against that because YouTube is a very centralized corporation in the way they can control and censor data. But the fact of the matter is, of just 10 to 20 years ago, there was your ability to curate content, produce that, and distribute it widely basically didn't exist. And the decrease in cost of this process, like of processing power, and your ability to distribute that information has actually allowed adoption for a whole number of very unique kind of transaction points. If we just look at information as a transactional data, here we go this, if A equals B, then here's C. So there's a function to the way we normally perceive a data. And what the internet did really uniquely was allow access to it, but it allowed for an infinite version of something, which is what, the LimeWire, Napster, or the kind of the proliferation of the copying of music or digital anything, photos, for instance. So the idea of a digital scarcity of any kind hadn't really been put into place yet. And importantly, also understanding that one of its most important places is in financial informational conversations, or actually really technically any informational conversation you'd want to have the maximum amount of integrity and with the minimum amount of loss between each parties that are trying to go through this informational transaction. So whether it's the transfer of a deed of property or the capital involved, this kind of informational transfer of wealth of some kind is really where we focus on. So I think the downside is that it looks very political, right, to the participants, because often the participants are caught up in the game of divided while being conquered, and it's pretty difficult to step outside of that unless you're forced to, So this idea that, okay, if you're in Sri Lanka and all of the banking system starts to collapse, they tell you can't take out funds, you're limited to how much you can move around. What are you willing to leave behind? And I was chatting with a really good friend, and to hear that they had even left their dogs behind is just such a wild thought. It's like in the moment of chaos, what's unique about assets like this is that they are non-state backed, and whether it's a property that you own or often businesses as well, because they are geographically located, there's a lot of liability to each of those assets, particular place and time within the world that it exists effectively. So this kind of idea that through time, all technology will produce a form of micro governance itself, the way it's decentralized power through distribution in technology like a YouTube, even though it's centralized, given someone like myself the ability to produce content and find an audience, something that I could have never done in the 1980s without having tens of millions of dollars in budget effectively. So this process through time, I think, ends up at the kind of the story that we're looking for, which is a solution that doesn't rely on human nature for some of our contract, our governance, our identity, and monetary systems. So
I think it's the balance of all that. And there's so many experiments going on in crypto, and we're going to have mostly failures, but the successes are going to be real game changing, I think, for the world. Sorry to interrupt, but we have to pay the bills. And a word from our sponsor.
Hello, Kryptonize fans. I've got a token for you. We've had a lot of tokens come on the show. Some we like, some we don't. But we really like Tetragard. Why? Because it is a wrapped coin with Pax G, with Ethereum, Bitcoin, and this rewards token called Quadrant. So you get it all wrapped up in kind of a one-click buy at the website below. And if you hold on to it, you get rewards that you could sell back to the Ethereum blockchain and get more Ethereum just for holding what I'd liken to an ETF. So again, it's Tetragard. Check it out. This is a no-brainer to invest in, especially what's going on in this world.
And we're back. Let's continue with this great interview. I want to move into gaming, since that's a big focus of yours. I've got a lot of experience there, done a lot of gaming NFTs with a former company. So let's talk about why there isn't a killer app that I've seen that's on the blockchain or even off blockchain with a crypto component. Yes, you could trade some things around as NFTs in some of these games, and with Wax, you could do it a lot until they shut that down. So what is going on? Do we not have good game designers in crypto gaming?
Well, that's definitely not the case. A lot of the times in, let's say, traditional marketplace, the reason why Kodak misses the opportunity of the digital camera, even though they created in their own R&D department, isn't for lack of innovation at the company. It's for the inability to grow outside of an area that they've well defined and well regulated themselves into understanding, right? So this gets into conversations around, okay, who owns what? And a lot of these companies, they don't want to risk their internal already functioning business model to step outside to build something unique. The other side of this question is, I don't think that gaming would ever go to the level that it will go to now without this new adaptation. The potential for gaming as a financial service is a ridiculous concept, and it couldn't have existed in any other place.
Well, that's what surprises me, Tio, is that if you gamify this using tokens, you can incentivize people basically to leave their jobs in some cases. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm thinking to myself, I know how I would design the game. And I don't know why after 4 or 5 years of crypto gaming, we haven't come up with that killer app that rewards people for playing their games or doing things in the game that helps something. I mean, you can even do things in the game that helps people outside the game. And it's amazing what you can do with it, but I haven't seen it. So where is it?
Well, it definitely takes time. The evolution, I think, and the value proposition isn't often noticed until it's put under the guise of necessity. So something like Axie Infinity caught a lot of its adoption because of the crisis, the pandemic, and of lack of access to work. And all of a sudden, this proliferation of people that were collecting assets and building the name and growing the network effect. And I think we often overlook the power of the network effect. In 2017, we were super excited about things like Steemit because we thought post to earn at that time was going to be the big thing. And we saw the same type of adoption in Venezuela. People were posting on Steemit. They were making more than their average wage and they were able to trade it for Bitcoin, Ethereum. So we saw that the technology, even in the early stage growth of a network of any kind, whether it's a social network or a gaming network, who's poised to do that the best. And I think, what faulted the post to earn type of mentality that was clearly there in 2017, and the reason why it still hasn't flourished today is because the gaming industry and the social media network industry is drastically different in terms of who can produce something and how big that one thing can grow. For instance, you look at a game like Stardew Valley, just one guy creates this kind of overnight success game. You don't have that necessarily in the social media space because of the fierce amount of competition that goes on, and it becomes a very walled garden place. So the ability to combat any of the larger players doesn't exist. But in the gaming industry, it's not quite the same. The connection between the esports teams and the YouTubers and the games was kind of starting to disintegrate anyways. Content creators' value is clearly becoming one of the front runners of the space itself. Almost like, okay, well, if no one's watching me play your game is not popular. So there's a clear trend change in the direct to consumer relationship between what it is everyone is doing. And I think in large respect, at least in the gaming ecosystem. So they allowed for this, the prospect to take over an area that wasn't as wall guarded with hundreds of billions of dollars. Even though that capital is there in the gaming system, it's still in different companies like Blizzard or Activision or Sony or any of the other hundreds of companies that make video games. So it was a little bit freer, I think, to really take off. But with that said, post to earn, just like the play to earn gaming where we are now, I think it just takes time. Something like a brand growth of Bored Apes, I think will be a huge play in the future, because what happens when you have natural adoption of a brand? How big is that brand IP's worth? We were on our board call the other day. It's like, okay, well, what had happened if you had seen South Park and you could have bought a Cartman, like they had a 10,000 character set in the lottery of South Park, and they were using it to launch their cartoon or whatever, and you got to own this Cartman. What would Cartman be worth today as like a single asset IP within the South Park franchise? And it could probably millions of dollars, I would assume, right?
You could use crypto to self-fund your game if you're smart enough and you know how to market it, this brand new game that's revolutionary. I don't know. I'll just use an existing game to demonstrate my point. What if you had like a Minecraft for crypto and things that you built in there you could sell off as NFTs? Again, I'm just making this up. And you said, hey, you get in early, we'll give you a bunch of tokens, and then you could use those tokens in game to create NFTs, and you could sell those NFTs. This is just one example. I'm just off the top of my head. You could self-fund that. I'm pretty sure if you say this is the crypto Minecraft killer, that you could find a way, especially if you hire a marketing agency or you work with some smart people, that you could self-fund that and then have a perpetual annuity stream for everybody involved. And I just don't know why we haven't seen that yet. And then great games, and I know there's some good games. I don't want to knock anyone on crypto, but the great game makers that you see from Activision and all these other companies, that it hasn't been put into the space yet. Now I know why, because of the Kodak effect that you talked about. I know why some of the big ones haven't done it, but where are the startups that are building these things and then either selling it to the big boys or funding it in the way I've described?
Yeah, they're there already, for sure. So Averick Saga was we made a bunch of investments in the kind of gaming industry right now.
Are you saying it's funded but just hasn't come out yet, or
no?
Is it out?
Some of these projects are being funded through this kind of community network adoption. Yeah, absolutely. Averick Saga is a great example. There are others as well. That's sort of like, here's our set of NFTs, and they turn that. It's like using the NFT more as a product instead of financial instruments. Using the IP of the brand as a product instead of as part of the financing instruments. Which again is kind of one of the areas of, okay, well, what is an NFT? Is it a financial instrument? Is it a collectible? Like, is it a product?
We already know this works because at Wax we saw people trading guns. We saw people trading clothing and outfits for money. You could sell it on eBay. You could sell it within the Wax ecosystem. So we know it works. And I'm like, well, where's the killer app that has taken advantage of all this stuff? And maybe they're coming. Maybe that's what you're saying.
Yeah, it's branding adoption. It's things like the Bored Apes, where you have a natural cultural adoption of something, I think, very unique. And it really stands out as in comparison with the traditional market, because the traditional market, it took a long time to get exposure and penetrate any type of market. Now with the internet, because of the way Web3 communicates, largely through a small group of individuals who have been interested in these types of technical conversations for a long time, it moves quite quickly in terms of who likes what. You know, the CryptoPunks is kind of example of this. Isn't this super hot art piece, right? You know, a lot of people would look at a Basquiat piece of art and be like, what kid painted this? You know, so there's this kind of unique perspective of who are the people that are moving the adoption of that type of branding. Like, South Park was a kind of cultural branding of its day, even though it was designed by its creators. Like, I think any one of us who watched it over the years, we felt akin to this kind of political satire and the clear, discombobulation between what was going on and what reality was showing. So I think, we are kind of a product of our generation. And like one of the generations is really strongly here in Web3 is this, let's say 22 to 42 generation. Now there's people that are older than that are here, but I think it's much more the native digital culture. And so the reason we don't have these big apps yet is because, well, it's new and the branding adoption hasn't really taken place yet. What's cool in this sector? Who are the cool people? Like, is it flashy watches and nice cars? Or is it this, like, the technology helping people in rural countries that don't have identification through video games? So the crypto sector has this weird multitude of faces because of that financial front runner. But I think ultimately, because games has such a branding element to it, in terms of what's unique, like art, it'll probably come out of nowhere. It's probably already here in front of us. So there's a bunch of fun games.
Do you have any games in mind that you think are going to kind of break through, maybe appear on an Xbox sometime or a PS1 that go mainstream?
So one of the fun things about venture for me is I know I'm going to get it wrong. It's a leading part of our.
But you've made some bets, right?
Well, so what we do is we try to look for these indicators. We're like, are there cute animals involved in the game? Are there psychedelic characters? You know what I'm saying? We try to keep our investment.
Do you have a checklist?
One of the fun things about games is it's made our investment thesis simpler to some degree. We like layer one conversations around things like Avalanche and Solana, but why we like games is for I think a broader reach in the way that the technology is ultimately adopted in the long term. But for actual game names, we like Star Atlas's vision, but building a AAA game takes time and it's super expensive. So those are two parts. But understanding, I think one of the other things too is that the common gamers don't necessarily understand the amount of power that the blockchain will yield within their game to want to be as excited as they should to actually incorporate it. So I think there's the disconnect of the people that really understand what crypto could do, and then the traditional gaming sector. A really big fan of Nyan Heroes because it's got cute cats and mecha robots. We like the AR VR world. Some of them were kind of moved to earn that we looked at too. But these are DeFi or DeFi, I guess. Solace. Drop as well. So there's more on the AR kind of VR marketing styles or product style of things, like a Pokemon Go, but for different areas. So, we try to look at the market as what could be adopted in the next 5 or 10 years, and what's going to create the advantage of that potential 100 to 1,000x gainer, and hopefully continues to grow after that. So we know we're making bets, but we keep it simple. It's like, okay, there's cute characters here. We like robots. So we'll go with this. Good, right, obviously quality team.
Before we wrap up, I just want to know what you think the future, let's fast forward 5 years. We're not going to hold you to this, Theo, but you fast forward 5 years. Has crypto gaming overcome traditional gaming, or is there a healthy mix, or what predict what's going to happen?
Well, I don't know the traditional gaming sector well enough to make a speculation on if it will have a disconnect and for how long. I think ultimately, again, where we see adoption is through necessity. So people that want to do the play to earn, they're going to be the ones that want that extra $3 to $5 a day that make a big difference in their life. Like a kid playing Fortnite who's used to buying skins might not adopt right away because it's easier to ask mom for $5 or something. Yeah. So I think there's a big difference in what that would look like. But gaming at large, I think will be a significant part of the future of blockchain itself. I feel that the way we get adoption is actually through games, because it's an easy on-ramp to someone into if you can jump on, you play a Candy Crush for like 5 or 10 minutes, you can earn like $3. You can trade that $3 for a little bit of primate token or something into ape token. I mean, that ape token gets traded into 10 mobile minutes for your cell phone, so you can keep playing the game. This type of, I think that ultimately, because we need a new financial system, the people that need it the most will be the first to adopt it. So I think we kind of have a backwards case of who's really going to make the most use out of this stuff first. It'll be the countries that have no other choice. The countries like Sri Lanka right now, they could be on a game plan to trying to produce something awesome for themselves, but what they have to do is first get rid of the system that's failed. And I think a lot of the globe right now is still living with a system that's failing. So it's hard to make that transition. Part of what we're monitoring is the crisis of the failure of how we got here. It's just this unbridled printing given to companies that definitely don't deserve it. No. And it's kept a lot of corruption alive for well longer than I've been alive, from as far as I can tell. I look back
the checks and balances are gone. If you look at what's happening in the courts and the legislature, the checks and balances are gone, and now they're just waving their middle finger at all of us. So this is what I love about the crypto industry. It's not controlled necessarily by a central authority, certainly not a political one. And there's a lot of decentralized things that are happening that will take it out of the control of almost all humans, which is, I think, the fairest route if it's well developed.
I wanted to give a short, tight answer to that too. I think that probably the supercharging of games for financial on-ramps will probably put a 3 to 4x on top of what the games are already doing, because games right now are not a two-way street. I think it dramatically changes how big the gaming sector is. It'll go from hundreds of billions to probably $1 trillion sector. It's just billions of people using the platform. It's as many as.
I tend to agree with you. I mean, most people don't know the gaming industry is, I think it's 10x bigger than even the film industry. I don't see how traditional gaming survives. Because let's just say Halo, if you had a traditional Halo and you had a crypto Halo, and one you earned prizes and money, and the sky's the limit as to what you could develop, the gaming mechanics and the token mechanics all combined in a game. There's no kid on earth, if they're smart, that's going to want to play one that they're not rewarded for, that they're constantly paying into, and not the other. where they can earn rewards and then trade or buy things or convert them to tokens and use those tokens for things in the real world. So
Yeah.
I think it's going to get really interesting. And I think some of these big traditional gaming companies are going to wake up to a rude awakening if they don't start looking at this and converting. And maybe they are.
They invest through side vehicles. So they have active investment arms. Like Unreal has active investment arms into the industry itself. It's like, okay, we need more people to use our gear. How do we do that? So the gaming sector itself is already making investments into the kind of Web3 funds and the builders out there like Animoca Brands, as an example. So what they'll do is, instead of kind of screwing with their internal core business structure, they'll invest in people who are already kind of leading those conversations, so they don't have to learn something entirely new. A lot of these big companies have learned to not be so harsh against the up and coming technology, recognizing, okay, we can't maybe profit off of our core model. So how do we adapt? Because every core business model generally will be eaten by tech at some point or another, unless you've got already a very tech-centric business.
Very good point. So we're going to wrap things up. Tiho, thank you very much for being on the show. Where do people get a hold of you?
Arcane Bear. Yeah, anywhere in the internet, you type in Arcane Bear, ARCANE BEAR. You'll find us on YouTube, on Twitter, LinkedIn. Where else? Like, I'm on Instagram. You can find everywhere on our website, arcanebear.com.
So with that, let's wrap things up, and really appreciate you being on the show.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for the chat, Mark. I appreciate it.